Classroom management. You are going to want students to spend a lot of their classroom time engaged in doing things in pairs, groups, etc. That means we have to think about how to organize these activities effectively and efficiently. Otherwise, we may end up with more time being spent giving instruction, etc., and less time for students to actually do the activities and use their English. Let's look at some of the basic classroom management principles you're going to need to consider. Classroom management principles. When we have an activity for students to do, one way of thinking about how we manage this is by comparing it to a burger. One with a thin piece of meat, another one with a bigger piece. Which one would you rather eat? Most people would probably choose the second burger because it's meatier. It's got more of the important stuff in the middle. Bread is nice, but at least part of its function is simply as a means of delivering the main event, the burger. If activities in the classroom were portrayed as a burger, we would also be aiming for the second one. The burger represents the task cycle. The first slice of the bun is the setup, and our aim here is clarity and efficiency. If we are unclear, if we take a long time, we end up with too much bread and not enough of the most nutritious bit, the activity itself. I will give you some examples and want you to answer which things you think would be helpful when setting up an activity or are a good example, and those you think would be unhelpful or are a bad example. 1. Let's imagine instruction for a speaking activity. Now what I want everyone to do is work with someone else in the group. It doesn't matter who. And what I'd like you to do is come up with several suggestions as to why you think that it might be a good idea for the man we read about to move house. So talk together and make your decision and summarize your reasons. Now, does everybody understand what I want you to do? 2. Ask students 1 or 2 questions to check they have understood what you want them to do, such as, do you need to write anything now? 3. Give students the handouts, materials, and then tell them what to do with them. 4. Stay central and make sure everyone can see and hear you when giving instructions. I'm pretty sure you will say that the first and the third examples are bad ones. The first instruction is very long and complicated and contains words or phrases which the students may not understand. A better way to word this would be, work together in threes, teacher gestures, nominates the groups. Together, agree on 5 reasons why you think he should move house. The third example isn't good either. If I give you a piece of paper, what is the first thing you want to do? Yes, look at it. If students are looking at the handout, they are often not listening, meaning the teacher will need to repeat instructions or students will be confused because they didn't hear. So whenever possible, give instructions before handing out the materials. The second and fourth instructions are really helpful. There is little point in asking students, do you understand? They will usually say yes, even if they don't. Instead, we should ask more helpful questions. These are called ICQs and are a good idea. They avoid asking if students understand and they save the teacher repeating things if they don't need to. And if you zoom in towards students when you are setting up an activity, you will find that you lose eye contact with some of the class. They will be looking at your back. At this point, they get the impression that what you are saying is not meant for them and you may lose their attention. Setting up tasks. So the key principles when setting up tasks are instructions before materials where possible, short, clear, graded instructions, use demonstration where possible, appropriate. Showing is often more effective than telling. Make use of instruction checking questions, ICQs, to be sure everyone knows what to do. Let's move back to our burger, especially meat. Hopefully we have set up the activity clearly and efficient, meaning students now have a good amount of time to do it. Let's imagine that is the case, and now students are happily engaged in a meaningful activity. What are you, the teacher, doing and why? Sometimes teachers feel a bit unnerved by stages in the lesson where they are not the focus. They wander about, not quite knowing what to do with themselves. The temptation is either to sit on the sidelines thinking about what comes next in the lesson or to get involved with the activity. Neither of these are great solutions. We have already said that we want students working on their own or with other students. So if we as teachers get involved, we will quickly find that students are deferring to us, and it's us rather than them doing most of the talking. Monitoring. At this stage, we need to get out of the way and let them get on with it. But this doesn't mean we don't have an important role. We need to know if students are doing what we want in the way that we want, and we need to know how successfully they are doing it. Are they having any problems? If so, what? Do I need to help? In order to find the answers to these questions, we need to monitor. How the students are interacting may affect our monitoring. For example, if the students are working individually on a written exercise, we want to see how they are doing, but we don't want to make them feel self-conscious. In this scenario, if possible, we might want to walk behind the students or sit far enough away to be unintimidating, but close enough to see what they are doing. In the sitting position, maintaining eye contact will make us accessible to students. They can catch our eye, rather than having to shout us over and draw attention to themselves. Similarly, if students are speaking in groups, we may need to be close enough to hear, and be on hand if they need help, but not so close as to distract or become overly involved. While we monitor, we may decide that we need to intervene. Why might this be? If the students are not doing the activity as we want, perhaps they have gone too far off topic, or we realize one or two of them are confused, then we can set this straight. If we hear mistakes that we want to correct there and then, this would not be any and all mistakes, only those that we can A, correct there and then without disrupting the activity too much, or B, those that we consider it essential we do something about. For example, mistakes with a language point we have been teaching that lesson. If neither of these criteria are met, we probably want to leave students to get on with the task and make comments and corrections after they have finished. This being the case, we need to monitor actively and carefully, perhaps with pen and paper in hand, noting down important points, mistakes. Otherwise, we are liable to forget exactly what we noticed when we monitored, and feedback will not be very helpful. Feedback. When students have completed the activity or the end of the time available for it is approaching, we need to conduct feedback. You might ask why? Why not let them continue the activity until the very end of the lesson? Well, imagine I ask you to do something for, say, 10 minutes. Then I stop you and say, okay, that's the end of the lesson. How do you imagine you will feel? Most probably you would wonder what the point of the activity was. And since I haven't commented on how you did, you might imagine that I didn't care. Or perhaps you have completed a reading task, but then we don't do any feedback on the answers. The chances are you are going to be left frustrated and still not clear on what you got right and what the answers are to any you didn't get finished. Okay, so feedback is essential, but how do we go about it, and is it always conducted in the same way? Firstly, if you remember, one of the principles of modern language learning is to minimize teacher-centered time and maximize student-centered time. One way we can do this is, when appropriate possible, include a pair or group feedback checking stage before the whole class, or teacher-led checking. So if students have read and answered questions or worked individually on a grammar exercise, they can help each other and compare. In helping each other, they are likely to get more of the task correct. This means the T-fronted feedback can be more efficient, as they've done more of the work themselves. The pair check also gives the teacher another opportunity to monitor and decide if anything needs further clarification.